The skies just got a little less friendly for hijackers. In an effort to put armed federal agents on more flights, the U.S. Secret Service has begun telling the Air Marshal Service when its agents will be in the air. That way, air marshals can skip flights where a Secret Service agent is already on board, bring them to fly on other planes. The thought of anyone having to draw and fire a weapon during a flight is frightening. You may not be aware of it, but it has happened here in the U.S. Here's Rob Stafford.
I think about it, especially after September 11th. I think about it, and it really scares me.
Some nights, Robert DeNisco still wakes up in a cold sweat.
It started out an ordinary day, and it ended up a total nightmare, something I'll never forget as long as I live.
Sandy Adamson wasn't sure how or if she would survive.
That early morning experience is indelible in my mind.
An experience John Gilman hopes few others have to face.
How did you feel?
But 33 years ago in San Francisco, a dramatic event united these three people, first in fear, then in purpose. Their courage made history in headlines. And the nation got to watch the drama unfold on television as this plane sat on the tarmac in San Francisco. For Robert DeNisco, the events of September 15, 1970 began as so many of his life's adventures have, around cargo. Today, he's a semi-retired truck driver. But back then, he was an armed courier for Brinks, guarding multi-million-dollar money and security shipments cross-country on commercial passenger flights.
On that particular night, I believe I started out with about $50 million.
Your job is to protect $50 million.
Right.
And your job is on the line.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
DeNisco was used to danger and to weapons. He was an Army veteran who'd seen combat in Vietnam and Korea. That night aboard TWA Flight 15, he was carrying a loaded .38 handgun.
When I'm on the plane, normally I keep the gun in my briefcase, and I keep the briefcase right with me.
DeNisco was in a first-class window seat, positioned to watch any activity around the hold where his cargo was secured. As required by airline regulations, he told the flight crew he was armed, and that he'd be getting off at scheduled stops in Chicago and Los Angeles to supervise delivery to the Brinks trucks. Everything went smoothly, and at 4:43 in the morning, Flight 15 took off on the last leg of the trip from L.A. to San Francisco, 53 people on board.
And that old 707 in that rear end just kind of rocked. Felt good. Very relaxing to me.
Flight attendant Sandy Adamson sat in the back of the plane. Captain John Gilman was at the controls.
It was smooth air, beautiful night, and we climbed out above the city lights and towards the stars.
And everything was going as planned.
Right.
But 15 minutes later, that changed. In the rear of the plane, Sandy Adamson had just finished serving coffee and was heading back to the galley.
As I got pretty close to the rear of the aircraft, the gentleman that was sitting in the window seat towards the back, about maybe 3 rows from the last row, reached over and handed me a note.
Did it strike you as odd when this passenger handed you a note?
No. Are you kidding? I'd been handed notes before by men. You know, business cards, if you're ever in town, can we have dinner, something like that.
You get back, you open the note, and what does it say?
The note said, I'm hijacking this plane to North Korea. I have a gun. Do what I say. No one will get hurt.
A 4.5-year TWA veteran with nearly 2 million air miles of experience, Adamson calmly assessed the situation. The hijacker was in his mid-30s, well-dressed, and confident in his demands and his handling of the gun. The first step, she figured, was to win his confidence.
The first thing I did say to him was, now I want to be honest with you about something. We do not have enough gas, enough fuel to go to North Korea.
Adamson got him to agree to land in San Francisco to refuel, and the hijacker sent her to the cockpit to tell the pilot his demands.
I turned to her and I said, is this for real? And she said, that's what I asked him, and he showed me his gun. And so I said, okay, go back and tell him we'll cooperate as best we can.
Captain Gilman slowed the plane to buy some time. Then he called air traffic control.
I said, L.A.? My voice went up. I had to fight to get my voice back down.
That deep pilot voice, you lost that for a second?
Yeah, I lost that. And so it helps to be in control if you got that deep voice. And so I got it back, and so then I told them that we had somebody that wanted to hijack us to North Korea, and to stand by.
Then another flight attendant reminded Gilman that an armed Brinks courier, Robert DeNisco, was on board.
And so I said, ask him if he'll help us and if we need him.
The first thing that went through my mind was, well, this is my test. This is what I'm here for. This is my job.
That was good news, because we now had an option.
You now know there are 2 men with weapons on board, and one of them's on your side.
Right.
The captain and his crew were determined not to let the hijacker commandeer the plane. They figured DeNisco could help stop it, and Plan A was to lure the hijacker to the front of the plane.
I wanted to bring him into first class to me. That way I could deal with him with no fear of being interfered or hurting anybody else. It would be just me and him in that first class, and I knew that I could bring him down.
Somewhere along the line, we did ask him to come up, and he refused to come up to the cockpit.
So the hijacker foiled their plan by staying in the galley at the rear of the plane. And time was running out. They'd been in the air for over an hour since leaving Los Angeles and were minutes from landing in San Francisco. It was time to consider Plan B. They had to get DeNisco to the hijacker and risk a shootout on board.
There is the dangers of damage to the aircraft and, of course, people getting hurt.
We've got to stop it. I don't know what he's going to do. He may hurt someone. So it's either him or someone else.
And the someone else was the Brinks courier, Robert DeNisco.
I had a job to do. This was my job, to stop this incident.
A showdown and a shootout.
The minute I yelled police and put him in sight, I let it around him.
But what would happen if he missed? From our studios in New York, here again is Stone Phillips.
Returning to our story, a hijacker is demanding to be taken to North Korea. What he doesn't know is that he's not the only one on board with a gun. The plane also happened to be carrying millions in cash and an armed courier. But the last thing anybody wanted was a shootout at 30,000 feet. Here again, Rob Stafford.
At 6 a.m. on that clear September 1970 morning, hijacked TWA Flight 15 was closing in on San Francisco. In the cockpit, Captain John Gilman was coordinating with law enforcement on the ground. In first class, courier Robert DeNisco was figuring out how to get to the hijacker who was in the back of the plane. And back in the galley with the hijacker, flight attendant Sandy Adamson devising a way to get some of the passengers off the plane.
I said to the hijacker, you know that we have a lot of small children and babies on board. It's a long flight over to North Korea. How about if we let them off with their parents?
So you're manipulating him now?
Trying to, yes.
She then reminded him of the USS Pueblo and suggested American military would be treated harshly in North Korea. The hijacker sent her back to the cockpit with word that children and military personnel could get off in San Francisco.
Every time she would take a message to the cockpit and vice versa, she would have to pass me. She would normally stop and pretend she was getting me a blanket or, taking care of my needs. She would whisper or say something to me, and then she'd go completely on.
What were the messages she gave you?
Well, the first one was I wanted to know what kind of weapon the man had, exactly what he was wearing, what he looked like. I wanted a complete and detailed description of the man so I knew who I had to deal with.
All this time, the only ones on Flight 15 who knew what was going on were the flight crew, the hijacker, and DeNisco. But word of the drama had reached the news media after the captain had alerted law enforcement on the radio. Television crews set up at the airport to record the drama. Then Captain Gilman made an announcement.
I said, ladies and gentlemen, we have a gentleman on board who wants to go to another airport, and he wants us to go with him.
No time did he mention the word hijacking over the PA.
Did the passengers understand what was going on?
Some of them did. Some of them did not.
Stairs were then driven up to the plane. Those with children disembarked first. Then Adamson went on the PA system.
I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a military passenger, even though you may not be in uniform, if you'll please come forward, grab your personal belongings, please come forward. You may deplane the aircraft. And there was people who got up and caught what I was trying to tell them.
Your message is, I don't care if you're in the military or not. Now's your chance.
Get up and get off the airplane.
30 passengers of the 53 who'd taken off from Los Angeles disembarked. Now Captain Gilman left the cockpit and told Courier DeNisco to make his move.
He was not mincing words about what his intentions were to stop this hijacking.
I go back to the cockpit and tell the police, okay, we're going to go ahead and try to shoot the hijacker. So be ready to board on my signal.
Ground, is there any police that are on this frequency? Yes, sir. The one to your right behind you. I want him to be ready to rush the aircraft, but only at my command.
Law enforcement on the ground was preparing to rush the plane. But aboard Flight 15, there was a problem. DeNisco was still in first class in the front of the aircraft, the hijacker at the rear, in the galley.
There's still passengers between me and him, and what I didn't want him to do is to see me coming back toward him, start shooting, and kill passengers.
So Adamson, incredibly cool and under control, suggested to the hijacker he might want to move the first-class passengers back into coach to keep a closer eye on them.
He said, fine. That would be good.
Now, this gave me the opportunity to get up and walk back into the coach.
At this point, how are you concealing your weapon?
It was still in my briefcase, but I was carrying it.
The plane had now been sitting on the tarmac, supposedly refueling for more than an hour. The hijacker began to sweat.
He had asked me for water, and I brought back a couple of cups of water, and I gave him one, and I drank the other one. And I had that empty paper cup in my hand.
Did you see his demeanor change?
Yes, he got more tense, more nervous, especially if the fuel truck's not coming up, and he'd be looking out the windows and looking around.
As he was doing that, he now left the cover of the galley and started to move up the aisle, looking out the windows, trying to see what the fuelers were doing.
Adamson knew time and the hijacker's patience were running out. She convinced him to let her go toward the cockpit one last time.
And when I got to the Brinks Courier, I dropped that empty paper cup that I was holding, and I bent over to pick it up.
She said, he's in the aisle, clear.
If you're going to do it, you got to do it now, or you're not going to have another chance.
I jumped up, I yelled police. The man saw me, I saw him. I did not see his gun, but I wasn't going to take any chances. And the minute I yelled police and put him in sight, I let a round off.
Where did you hit him?
Right in the stomach.
I hear this little pop, and I think that has to be it. That must be it. And so I got on the radio.
Get the security forces on board now. Go on board now. Come on, security, let's go, please. Go.
Once I saw the police rushing aboard, it just struck me that they might start shooting at me.
Thinking you're the hijacker.
Thinking I'm the man.
But the police figured out who was who and took the hijacker, identified as 27-year-old Donald Irwin, who'd served in the Army in Korea and had a history of mental problems, to a nearby hospital where doctors saved his life.
When I read the note and I saw North Korea, my knees started shaking pretty good.
And the three heroes of Flight 15, the only people to have ever thwarted a hijacking on U.S. soil, led the news.
Where did you hit him? In the stomach.
Robert DeNisco was given a medal. Then President Nixon invited him to join the U.S. Sky Marshals program, which was just starting up, but he opted to stay at Brinks.
Morning.
Hi, Donald. How you doing?
Okay.
Sandy Adamson also got an FAA medal, stayed with TWA, and moved over to American Airlines when they merged.
So you don't need to rewrite it.
Captain John Gilman retired from TWA in 1992 and has been working toward finally getting his college degree. All three have gone their separate ways. And as for hijacker Donald Irwin, he's now 62 years old and confined to a wheelchair most of the time due to the complications from the shot he took back in 1970. He pleaded guilty to attempted kidnapping and served 3.5 years in a California mental institution. Today, he lives in a retirement home on a veteran's pension. He told us the hijacking was supposed to be a rescue mission.
Always trying to help American prisoners in North Korean camps if they want to come home, and the prisoners and American prisoners in North Vietnam. A lot of friends fighting over there.
He says he never meant anyone any harm.
I had a starter pistol. I wasn't going to hurt nobody.
The gun indeed turned out to be a starter pistol loaded with blanks. And while it couldn't hurt anyone, it looked very real. And even the hijacker is amazed he got it through the metal detectors, which turned out to be unmanned at the airport at 4 in the morning when he got on board.
I had in my back pocket my boarded the plane. Easy as that.
Robert DeNisco knows getting through modern airport security is more difficult than back in 1970. But even so, he and his fellow veterans of that fateful flight say a second line of defense is still necessary.
Once the incident starts on the aircraft, can you control it? And the only way to do that is to have the control on the aircraft.
And if you lose that?
If you lose it on the aircraft, it's finished, it's gone.
A lesson, says DeNisco, we tragically relearned 31 years later on September 11, 2001.